JAI BHIM. It's such a pleasure to say JAI BHIM here in the United Nations. JAI BHIM. And I want to offer warm thanks to Dilip Maske for his role in setting up this amazing gathering for us. He compared Babasaheb Ambedkar to Moses, Jesus, Jefferson, and Lincoln, and I'd like to spend just a few moments with you comparing Dr. Ambedkar's career with that of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., who many of us here also recognize as a great liberator. Ladies and gentlemen, we gather here at the UN today to honor the memory of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, India's most fearless and eloquent voice for equality. This year, 2016, is a fitting time to revisit Ambedkar's lifelong struggle for Dalit human rights and to place it alongside the struggles of other marginalized people in the world today. For 2016 marks the 125th anniversary of Ambedkar's birth and the 60th anniversary of his death. It also recalls a landmark victory at the beginning of America's civil rights movement. 60 years ago, Dr. Ambedkar launched the largest mass Buddhist conversion in history, identifying the ancient teaching of Dharma with the struggle for human rights and the abolition of caste in India. Ambedkar chose Buddhism as a philosophy of nonviolent social change that sees each person as precious and equal. He chose the date October 14th to lead 500,000 ex-untouchables into Buddhism because that date is associated with the Buddhist conversion of India's greatest king. Ashoka Maurya's armies had subdued most of South Asia in the 3rd century BCE through violent conquest. But then he had a profound change of heart, and henceforth he ruled his empire by Dharma Vijaya, a policy of tolerance and equal protection of all citizens under law. While Ambedkar and his followers embraced Ashoka's legacy in 1956, the American civil rights leader, Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., won his first victory in the U.S. Supreme Court, ending the Montgomery bus boycott and establishing the principle of equality for African Americans on public transportation. In the 6 decades that have passed since then, the followers of Ambedkar and King have won many victories. King was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, the youngest man to receive this award, and Ambedkar was awarded the Bharat Ratna, India's highest civilian award, in 1990, 34 years after his death. Sadly, these honors do not mark the achievement of equality for tens of millions of Dalits, OBCs, and tribal citizens in India who still suffer the world's highest rates of poverty and violence, or for blacks in the United States who are subject to daily violence in the streets, systematic discrimination in the workplace, and the highest rates of incarceration of any group in the world. Nor are the legacies of Ambedkar and King equally revered around the world. Ambedkar, one of the most outspoken and visible founding fathers of the Indian Republic, remains virtually unknown outside of India. Most people know that Mahatma Gandhi led the fight for independence and that his nonviolent marches inspired Dr. King and the American civil rights movement. But few people know of Ambedkar, the first untouchable to attend college, the first to earn advanced degrees in New York and London, to pass the bar and launch mass movements for access to public drinking water and temple worship, the first appointed law minister of India, and the principal author of its constitution, and the first modern politician to embrace mass religious conversion as a means to social transformation. At the same time, Ambedkar was not alone in demanding social justice in the name of religious truth and morality. Martin Luther King, Jr. was a 27-year-old preacher and a doctoral student when the bus boycott he led ended up in the Supreme Court. Born in Atlanta, Georgia, as a Baptist minister, Martin earned distinction in college and seminary and was himself ordained a minister at the age of 19. Still hungry for education, he went on to earn his doctorate in philosophy and theology at Boston University. Like Ambedkar, King quickly applied his education to the service of his people. At 28, he founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and addressed a crowd of 15,000 in Washington, D.C. The following year, Congress passed the first Civil Rights Act, and King published his first book, Stride Toward Freedom. At that age, Ambedkar had also published his first book titled Castes in India, Both young activists were hailed as the new leaders of an age-old struggle. King led nonviolent protests and sit-ins to integrate public accommodations. He was stabbed, beaten by police, jailed, and spied on by the FBI. Nevertheless, in June 1963, he led 125,000 marchers on the Freedom Walk through Detroit, followed in August that year by the historic rally of 250,000 people on the Washington Mall, where he delivered his I Have a Dream speech. There are many parallels between the anti-caste movement in early 20th century India and the civil rights movement in the U.S. since the 1950s. Although caste and race are different, one, artificial ranking of human worth based on social restrictions, and the other on history and physical appearance, the struggle against prejudice, privilege, and power have taken similar forms in the two democracies. Ambedkar and King both experienced discrimination while growing up. As a boy, King was best friends with a white boy from across the street. But one day, his friend's parents announced that he was no longer welcome to play with their son. "We are white and you are colored," they told him. His mother tried to soothe his wounded feelings by saying, "You must never feel that you are less than anybody else. You must always feel that you are somebody." In the coming years, King learned that not all whites were devils. Ambedkar suffered endless humiliations as a boy growing up in India, as many of you know. But like King, he also attracted and valued the support of powerful allies. The princes of Baroda and Kolhapur recognized the young untouchable's brilliance and paid his tuitions in Elphinstone College, Columbia University, and the London School of Economics. And Ambedkar's appointment as India's first law minister could not have occurred without the support of high-caste Hindus like Gandhi and Nehru. After seeing the passage of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, King was fatally shot in 1968. The anguish of the nation was marked by violent street demonstrations across America. 12 years earlier, millions of Dalits had poured peacefully into the streets of Mumbai and across India to bid farewell to their leader, as we just saw those amazing photos in the film clip. Today, the struggle for Dalit rights in India and the Black Lives Matter movement in the U.S. remind us of the battles of Ambedkar and King. The old questions remain. How can we create societies of equality, freedom, and brotherhood? How can we reach out beyond barriers of caste, class, race, and religion to forge alliances of peace and justice? These questions are compounded by developments that have made the 21st century more complicated and more dangerous. We're witnessing an inexorable loss of safety and privacy in the fight against global terrorism. We're contributing relentlessly, despite the heroic efforts of some, to the climate change that threatens the life support systems on which we depend. We take pride in the global reach of information technologies that nevertheless blind and addict users to realities that are virtual and not real. And the theme of this panel, we stand by as vast inequalities of income, opportunity, and human rights mushroom in countries both rich and poor. In the decades since 1956, even the U.S. Supreme Court has changed for the worst. Corporations are now considered people, money is considered speech, all protected by a constitution that Ambedkar and King both believed in. In India, liberal voices and those critical of the status quo face death. M.M. Kalburgi, the 77-year-old scholar and critic of Hindu idol worship, was gunned down on his doorstep last August. Govind Pansari, the communist leader, was killed last year in Mumbai. And today, India is racked with demonstrations over caste violence in higher education following the tragic death of Rohit Vemula, a PhD student attempting to live by Dr. Ambedkar's philosophy of nonviolent social change. If Ambedkar and King were alive today, we can be sure that each leader would address himself to these challenges. King did not confine himself to the fight for racial justice, but came out against the war in Vietnam and fought for economic justice. Ambedkar refused to be pigeonholed as a politician. He, too, was a scholar, a teacher, an activist, and a spiritual leader. I would like to close with a quote from Dr. Ambedkar's career that many of you will recognize, one of my favorite quotes. Addressing 70,000 of his followers in Nagpur in 1942, He may have anticipated his conversion there 14 years later as he connected the struggle for equality with the need for personal courage. My final words of advice to you is educate, agitate, and organize. Have faith in yourself. With justice on our side, I do not see how we can lose our battle. The battle for me is a matter of joy. It is in the fullest sense spiritual. There is nothing material or social in it, for ours is a battle not for wealth or power. It's a battle for freedom. It's a battle for the reclamation of human personality. When a leader uses the word battle 6 times in a single breath, without implying that his audience should take up arms or threaten the safety of others, we may experience the passion and conviction that drove leaders like Ambedkar and King to sacrifice their lives for a cause. But we may also feel challenged to consider the roles each of us might play to achieve universal equality and the other sustainable development goals that member states, ambassadors, and activists here at the United Nations seek for our future. Thank you.